Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Jenny Dildine, the LDS Mission Coach, and you are listening to the LDS Mission Podcast, episode number 170. Let's talk about shame. I'm Jenny, the LDS Mission Coach, and whether you are preparing to serve a mission, currently serving, a returned missionary, or a missionary mama like me, I created this podcast just for you. Are you searching for epic confidence, ready to love yourself and to learn the how of doing hard things? Then let's go. I will help you step powerfully into your potential and never question your purpose again. It's time to embrace yourself, embrace your mission, embrace your life, and embrace what's next. Hey, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to be hanging out with you today. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being part of this community where we have resources and tips and tools and strategies for every aspect of the mission experience. And it's definitely a unique one. I have mentioned a couple times that I was at the Restore gathering, Faith Matters Restore, a couple weekends ago, talking to a lot of different people. There was one group of young adults that had been on missions probably 4 years ago or so. And they were just like, there's really not much that's normal about going on a mission. And I was like, that's sort of true. Like there's a lot there, like living with a new stranger every 6 weeks. And, only being able to talk to, your loved ones like once a week. And I don't know, there's just a lot there, and having these rules and, all of the things. So missions are amazing, and there's a lot of good that can come out of them. But also I think it can be useful for us to have more resources and tools to sort of navigate all of that. And that is true, I think, for us as parents. I think as mission leaders. I also talked to several senior missionaries at the Faith Matters gathering. I actually had a senior missionary just recently reach out and say, I want your tools so that I can help, the missionaries when I get out to the field. She's 85, by the way. Isn't that the cutest thing? I just love that. And so then companions and missionaries, RMs, all of the things. So we just want to be a useful resource for you where you can talk about your real stuff for the mission and real things that are coming up for you, and that we can get some real help and real tools out to you so that you can navigate all of it better wherever you're at in the mission experience. So just a little shout out this week to my oldest son who had a birthday. He was the one that actually got me started on this journey to help missionaries. And then just observing him kind of go through the process of a mission, and observing myself while he was on the mission and when he left on the mission, and then watching him come home from the mission about the same time I was going to the life coach school, getting certified as a life coach. I just was like, ooh, I think we can do better than this. I think we can help a lot more than we do with these sort of mindset and emotional tools, failure, relationships, all this stuff. And so observing him and observing myself during that time is kind of what got me started down this path. And then today is not my youngest daughter's birthday, but it is her birthday tomorrow. So, and she's going to be 13. So she's a teenager. My baby's a teenager. So there you go. That's where we're at. I am interested today to talk about shame. And I think there's a lot of different ways that we can talk about shame. And I think we have a lot of ideas about shame and kind of the role that it plays in our life. I think we have a lot of ideas about where shame comes from. And so what I want today to be is just sort of like a conversation, or I'm just going to put out a bunch of my thoughts about a bunch of reading that I've done about shame in the last little bit, a lot of thinking I've done about shame in the last little bit. And actually over the last several months, just kind of mulling it over in my head and trying to decide if the way we're thinking about shame is useful. And the way you're thinking about shame, I just want us to be able to sort of take a look at it. And hopefully this will give you some stuff to think about, and so that you can decide if the way that you're thinking about shame is useful for you and if it's propelling a useful set of actions. So, right, what we usually talk about here is that our thoughts create our feelings, and then those feelings drive a set of actions. And so if the way that we're thinking about shame will create an emotion, right? So it could be more shame. It could be like empowered, whatever emotion we're feeling when we think about shame in a certain way is going to create an emotion, and that emotion is going to have drive a certain set of actions, and then it's going to have some outcomes in the end. So first of all, what I want to do is I want to talk about like some of the differences between shame and guilt, because I think this is kind of how we talk about it in our church culture a little bit, is there's guilt and then there's shame. I've also, in a lot of some of the stuff I read, a lot of people talk about Brene Brown and her work around shame and her research around shame. And she kind of talks about the difference between guilt and shame. A lot of researchers kind of talk about the difference between guilt and shame. And so I want to talk a little bit about the differences between the two. Then we're going to talk about some of the similarities. And then we're going to talk about some of the things that can be useful and some things that might not be useful. And then at the very end, I want to kind of share with you some other research done by Brene Brown, the 4 elements of shame resilience. And of course, these episodes are always prompted by sessions I'm doing with clients, right? Or things that I'm observing in people that I talk to, or things that I am observing in emails that I get from missionaries, from kind of things I'm seeing happening in the missions and when we get home from the mission and things like that. And so I kind of wanted to address some of that here. So most commonly, the way that people describe guilt comes from thoughts like, I did something wrong, right? And guilt is usually associated with a problem that's outside of us. So I did something wrong outside of me. It's often also repairable. Like when we feel feelings of guilt, it's often like something we can sort of work through or like repair. Oftentimes people say guilt moves us into action. Okay, so like if we're feeling guilty, then maybe we would move to action to kind of make amends with something or fix something. The example that came to my mind is like, and maybe we've all heard this example a million times, but like if you actually, like you're a child and you take a candy bar without, and not realizing, but then you get home and you show mom the candy bar and mom's like, that doesn't really align with our values. That's actually not okay. And then, you feel this guilt. And so then you go back and you sort of make amends and you pay for the candy bar and all of that. Okay. So this guilt can move us to action. And one of the things I read is that it's a perceived discrepancy between one's actual behavior, what someone actually does, and what the expected behavior is. Or sometimes if you're comparing your actual behavior to an outcome or a rule that's expected, okay? Shame, on the other hand, is usually, instead of I did something wrong, it's pretty widely accepted right now that it is more this thought that there's actually something wrong with me. So instead of the problem being outside of us, the problem is actually in us, right? It's within. It starts to feel like we are the thing that's broken, not the thing that we did, right? That we are broken, that something is inherently wrong with us, and that can lead to hopelessness. Instead of thinking like, I did that bad thing, shame is usually associated with, I'm a bad person. And then this is a perceived discrepancy between one's actual self, what you're observing in yourself, within yourself, and one's ideal self, which I think is really interesting, right? Because we see this a lot on the mission. It's like we have this ideal of what we think we should be and the way that we think we should be showing up, and what is actually true and what's actually happening. Now, here's what I also have been thinking about, is that there's no real cut and dry. In fact, a lot of the stuff I read said that guilt and shame actually kind of tandem with each other a lot of times. A lot of times they exist together. So sometimes something that's guilt, like I feel guilty that I didn't get up on time, right, can turn into shame because there's something wrong with me if I didn't get up on time. Okay. And sometimes it can even be like, there's something wrong with me if I feel guilt. Okay. And so I think sometimes too, there can be shame that's not behavior related at all. It doesn't have anything to do with what we're doing or how we're showing up in the world. It can sound like, I'm ashamed of how I look, or I'm ashamed of how I feel. I'm ashamed of sort of some kind of deformity that I have, or whatever, right? We can feel ashamed just of the way we exist in the world. Okay. So I think rather than seeing these two things as black and white and as very different two opposites of a continuum, I think it's helpful to understand that sometimes these two emotions can sort of be like intertwined. They can sort of like play off of each other. Sometimes one will exist without the other. Sometimes they'll exist at the same time. And I think that that's just super useful to know. And I'm going to get into why I think that that can be super important to understand. Let's talk about the similarities between guilt and shame. So both kind of imply that there's a negative evaluation of self. Okay. So like that can be from an outside source, like I should be getting up at this certain time, or it can be kind of from an internal place, like what's wrong with me because I didn't get up at this certain time. Either way, both emotions come from us kind of not seeing that we're measuring up to something, either a standard we have for ourselves or a standard that someone else has put into place. Another similarity is both guilt and shame are human emotions. I think this is really good to know, you guys. We all feel shame from time to time. And there's no like right reason to feel shame. There's no wrong reason to feel shame. There's no right reason to feel guilt. There's no wrong reason to feel guilt. We all feel shame from time to time based on how we're sort of perceiving ourselves. And all of the stuff that I read said that shame is a very natural human emotion to feel. Both emotions, guilt and shame, are self-preserving tendencies of our brain, right? When we talk about, which I talk about a lot on here, is that your brain, your lower primitive brain, sort of your toddler brain, is designed to offer you thoughts to shut you down and cause you to hide and stay in the cave, to stay safe, to stay protected, to not exert yourself, to not confront any sort of potential emotional pain. And so both guilt and shame are emotions that drive action, right? Of shutting down or making amends. And both of those things are useful. Our brain thinks are useful. And so it's a human thing. In fact, Brene Brown says that the only people that don't feel shame are people who don't have the ability to be empathic or to have empathy for someone, because they literally don't have the ability to like see outside of themselves and understand like, oh, this could impact someone, or like I want to show up in a different way they don't have the ability to sort of see that. So another similarity is that both are emotions. And we're going to get around to this, but I want to remind us that there's no wrong or bad emotion to feel. Emotion is literally just a vibration in your body. I did a couple sessions with clients this week, and we talked about what emotion is and why. What does it actually feel like in your body to feel shame? And I've done tons of episodes about this, about how to process your emotions. I think I did one just last week or the week before. So go check that out if you don't know how to process your emotions. But I'll never forget one client. She was experiencing a lot of sort of like self-judgment and things on the mission. The mission president thought it was best if she came home for a bit to kind of get it worked out so she could get her mindset and her emotional well-being figured out. And we got on the call and she literally just dropped her head and cried. And I was like, what's this emotion? And she's like, it's shame. And I said, I think you're just going to need to feel this shame. Okay? It's okay for you to feel shame. Now, shame is going to drive a certain set of actions, right? And some of them are going to be useful and some of them are not going to be useful. Interestingly, your brain, that primitive brain, thinks it is useful. And so we're just going to kind of keep picking this apart. One other similarity, both provide information that allow us to course correct or evaluate how we perceive ourselves compared to others or society's rules or expectations. And so both guilt and shame, are information. That's another way that I talk about emotions. They're not wrong or bad. They're information. They're sometimes just, we're meant to feel them, and it's okay that we feel them. And what happens when we feel guilt or shame is it does cause us to be like, wow, this is super uncomfortable. This doesn't feel like the way I want to feel. Not bad or wrong, but it doesn't feel super good. Maybe I want to evaluate either my behavior or evaluate the way I'm seeing myself or evaluate how I fit into this group or how I fit into this society or how I want to think about these expectations. Okay. Here is some of the things that are not useful. And I want to think about this like for you, if you're feeling shame or if someone else is experiencing shame. Number one, it is not useful to add fear to shame. Okay. I see this more than I want to see this with clients on the mission, after the mission. So we notice either that someone we love is feeling shame or we notice that we're feeling shame, right? And then what our brain tells us is like, oh, there must be something really wrong if I'm feeling this emotion. And that's just not true. Every human on the planet from time to time, as long as their brain is functioning correctly, as long as they have the ability to empathize and to put themselves in someone else's shoes and to sort of understand social norms and expectations, feels shame from time to time. Here's something else that's not useful. Deciding that guilt is acceptable and shame is not acceptable. So what I mean by this is I think that sometimes when we talk about this, there's a moral rightness, quote unquote, to guilt. And there's a moral, quote unquote, wrongness to shame. As if guilt is good way to feel and shame is bad. This is not useful at all. Because then what happens when we feel shame? Because we all will. Now we really feel like something's wrong with us. We end up feeling shame about our shame. Now we just have more shame. And it's not helpful at all. Here's the other thing that's not helpful. At least what I've seen is not helpful. And of course, you can decide these are just my ideas and what I've seen, and I want you guys to kind of play with this and decide what feels useful for you. What I've noticed that it's not useful to blame shame on Satan or to say things like, Satan wants me to feel shame. Okay? Even if that's true, in my mind, I don't really believe that's true, but even if that was true, it is so disempowering to think that Satan wants you to feel a certain way. I want us to picture a missionary who's doing their very best to obey the rules, to read their scriptures, to do their studying, to say their prayers, to fast, to go to their meetings, who's trying their very, very best to do what they're supposed to do, to feel the Spirit in their lives. And then we tell them that, oh, well, if you're feeling shame or guilt, that must be because Satan wants you to feel that. It's completely, number one, disempowering. Number two, it takes us out of the driver's seat. It's almost like a full stop where we lose access. When we just blame it on Satan, we lose access and power to create something different if we want to. It's totally disempowering, right? Then we start to see this, this is just like a spirit problem, like a spiritual problem. And it's not a spiritual problem. Like it's a normal human thing to feel shame. Now, does it drive the most useful set of actions? Not always. And we're going to talk about that, right? And we've talked about it a little bit already, that it does cause us to kind of hide and retreat. Okay. And then that cycle, that shame cycle just kind of feeds on itself because then more shame is created, right? More hiding. But it's totally okay that we feel shame. We don't need more shame about our shame. And that's what I told this missionary on the call. I'm like, I think you're just going to have to feel it. And so we got out of our head and into our body, and we found the shame in our body, and we processed it and we allowed it. And interestingly, just facing that, talking about it, looking at it, understanding it, helped the shame go away and dissipate. Okay? So what happens, right, is a missionary might go from feeling guilty for waking up late or sleeping in to shame if they start to believe there's something wrong with him. Okay? So like, oh, why can't I get up on time? I'm so ashamed. Or I'm not like following the rules. I'm so ashamed. So then we feel shame about our shame. And then we layer on more shame because someone told us that Satan is the author of shame. Now, if you think it's useful to think about this, I invite you to do so. But for me and for most of my clients, what feels so much better is to just be like, we all experience shame. I know how to feel it. It's okay if I do, and I'm going to move through it. And you just move through it so much more quickly because we're not trying to untangle this layer of like guilt and then shame on top of the guilt and then shame on top of the shame on top of the guilt and then shame on top of that shame on top of the shame on top of the guilt. Make sense? It's just so much easier, so much more useful, shall we say, to understand where the shame comes from, that it's totally okay, that we can accept it and we will move through it. And it's so much more empowering. Like, I can do shame. I've got this. I know how to do this. Rather than just shutting it down and being like, well, I guess this is what Satan wants me to feel. Okay? So if you're feeling shame, it's okay. If you're feeling guilt, it's okay. They're just emotions. Okay, let's talk about Brene Brown's 4 elements of shame resilience, which I loved because they go along so much with what I've been thinking about shame. Okay? So her first step is recognizing shame and understanding it. The first step is giving shame a name. It's you noticing, hey, I notice I'm feeling shame. Like I did with my client, I notice I'm feeling shame about this. If you're an RM, I notice I'm feeling shame about being on my phone longer than I want to be on my phone. I notice I'm feeling shame about not reading my scriptures or whatever it is. You can notice it, process it, and allow it. Your resistance of the shame or thinking the shame is wrong or bad or less spiritual in some way makes the shame escalate. It perpetuates the hiding. It perpetuates you like staying away and not connecting with people. It perpetuates the belief that something's wrong with me. Right? Can you see that? It's like, instead of being just like, oh, here's shame. Everyone feels shame. Totally fine to feel shame. I'm going to process through this shame. I must be having a little bit of a shame spiral today, right? Processing through that versus like, oh my gosh, I can't feel shame. That means something's wrong with me, right? So we just can recognize the shame and understand it, understand that it's human. Her second step is practicing critical awareness. I loved this word critical because this is where we can become the scientist. Sometimes I talk about this, becoming the observer or the scientist of the experience that we're just having. Okay, we don't have to add additional meaning to it, like Satan has power over me, or there must be something wrong with me, or that shame is wrong and guilt is right. Like we don't have to add any of that meaning. We can simply just notice it, have a critical eye for what's going on without any bias or judgment or opinion about it. And when we do this, when we really understand what the brain is doing and why, it's just literally trying to protect you from future pain or conserve energy. When we understand the purpose of shame and guilt and the information that shame and guilt provides, it makes it all okay. It's then becomes part of the human condition. I bet most people would be able to tell you when they were in a shame spiral, right? When they said something that they maybe felt like they didn't want to say, or when they did something that didn't align with who they thought they wanted to be. And that's okay. That is just information and we can observe it critically. Okay, her third step is reaching out. And I love this one. This is sharing your experiences with people. To know that then the more you tell people, oh, this thing, I felt a lot of shame around this time in my life, or I felt a lot of shame during this period of my mission. And we don't even have to say why or what happened, but the more that we share these experiences, the more people will start to empathize with you, validate you, and be like, oh my gosh, I felt that too. We will start to help other people see shame's okay, doesn't have to be a problem. And we will start to see that for ourselves. Like, I'm okay. I'm not a problem because I feel shame. We can start to normalize by reaching out. We start to normalize the human experience of guilt and shame. And the more we start to normalize it, the more we start to give shame a name, the more we start to become critical observers of our shame, the more it will help people. The more shame won't feel the need to hide and to isolate. Connecting with others helps us see that we're not alone or broken. It's like, oh my gosh, you feel that way too? Yeah, I feel that way too. And oh my goodness, I felt that way before. And then that is so connecting. When we share our human experiences with people, that is so connecting. And again, I'm not saying like we don't have to dirty all our laundry or share like all of our experiences, but some experiences we can share, right? About how we were embarrassed and that embarrassment led to shame about something we did or about our bodies even, right? Or the way that we see ourselves. And it's so powerful to just reach out to other people and create that empathy, that back and forth understanding. And then her fourth step in her shame resilience is to speak shame. She basically says speaking shame. And this is amazing because then we start to talk about shame in a way that doesn't add more shame. That's more matter of fact. We can call shame what it is. It's a literal vibration in your body. And we can start to separate out what shame feels like compared to what fear feels like, compared to what embarrassment feels like, to what guilt feels like, what anger feels like. We actually, when we speak about shame, we increase our emotional vocabulary. And we actually, when we're talking about it and speaking about it and giving it a name, we actually pull it out of the darkness. Okay? We pull it out of hiding. And this is what disintegrates shame, is when you pull it out of the hiding and you talk about it and you give it a name and you speak about it. Okay? And not add additional meaning like that's bad, that shame is bad and guilt is good. That doesn't even make sense. They're all just emotions, okay, that drive us to do certain things. And when we add additional meaning, we lose access to all of it. But when we can be, right, when we can be critical thinkers about it, when we can recognize it, when we can understand it, when we reach out to other people and we speak about it, we demystify it. We take out all of the this is bad or I shouldn't be feeling this way. And we start to understand that it's all a human experience that we're all having here. Right? It's just human that we feel this way. And you're human on your mission. You're human before you leave on your mission. You're human after your mission. Guess what? You're going to be human the rest of your life. And so you might feel shame again later, and it's totally okay. And you might feel guilt. And we don't need to split hairs about which of these are good or bad because it's kind of nuanced. It's kind of tricky. But just own it. Know that it's okay. And when you own it and know it's okay, you will get through it so much faster. I really think we need to stop vilifying shame. It's not useful to feel shame about our shame or guilt about our guilt or guilt about our shame or shame about our guilt. That just layers on emotion is not necessary and just makes us feel more hopeless. Like, how cool would it be if we can just be like, yeah, feel a little shame today, and just allow it and process it and speak about it. It will, if we did this, shame will lose its grip. Okay? And shame will lose its grip on all of it, right? We'll start to see, oh, there isn't a problem within me. We'll start to believe that we aren't broken or that it's hopeless. We'll stop believing I'm a bad person because I feel shame. And we'll start to really pick apart that it's okay to be one's actual self instead of always falling short to our ideal self. We'll start to believe there's nothing inherently wrong with me. That you're okay. That you're okay to think and feel and show up the way that you do. And this sort of surrender and acceptance and self-compassion is the way to make progress, not having shame about your shame. Okay? So I hope this helps you. Again, I don't prescribe to be an expert on this. I'm just sharing with you what I've seen is that when people have shame about their shame and when they vilify their shame, it doesn't help. So let's kind of take Brene Brown's shame resilience ideas to recognize the shame and understand it, practice critical awareness without any drama, reach out to people, share your experiences, and speak about shame in a way that doesn't add shame to shame. Here's to being human, you guys. It's not easy down here. It's not easy feeling these feelings. but it's totally normal and okay that you do. Okay? Sending you so much love. We will talk to you next time. Serving a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints can present a unique set of challenges. And many of those challenges you might not even see coming. So you're going to want a unique set of solutions. It's easier than you think to overcome worry and anxiety, serve the successful mission you've always dreamed of, and navigate your post-mission experience with confidence. That is why I created some amazing free goodies that I'm sharing in my show notes. Maybe you'll want to grab the free training for preparing missionaries, my video course for RMs, or maybe you and I should hop on a free strategy call. If you're ready to take your preparedness to serve or your preparedness to come home to the next level, then go grab one of those freebies. And in the meantime, no matter which part of the mission experience you are involved in, just know that Jenny, the LDS mission coach, is thinking about you every single day.